In this movie, I'd like to introduce you to the room object and specifically how to create a color fill plan from the room objects. So the room objects in Revit represent the actual rooms or the spaces that are enclosed by your walls and other geometry. One of the features that room objects have is the ability to be color-coded to represent various information about our space. So what I'd like to do is create a color presentation plan here that indicates the function of each of the spaces in my overall plan. So the basic process we need to follow is an overall 3 steps. We need to add some rooms, which are going to represent the actual spaces. We need to assign data to those rooms to represent their different functions, and then finally create a color scheme that will color based on those functions. So it starts with the room object, which we can find on the Architecture tab here on the Room and Area panel right here. Now, the way that the room object behaves is that if you move your mouse into the screen, you'll see that if I were to click outside the building, I would get just this generic rectangle, and Revit would actually generate a warning telling me the room was unbounded because there's no surrounding geometry. But as soon as you move your mouse into the space, you see how it starts to conform to the shape of the surrounding rooms? So that's probably a little bit more the behavior that I'm after. The trouble is that most of my space is an open plan, and if I move out here into this main space, you can see that that room fills into everywhere. Public spaces, private spaces, and so on, because there's no separation between any of those. So before I start placing the rooms, I need to do one little bit of pre-work. So I'm going to press Escape to cancel out of here. And then right below the room button, there's a room separator button. Room separators are just lines, and you can draw them straight lines or curved lines, whatever shape they need to be, and you use them to separate 2 spaces from one another. So, for example, I might want to have this vestibule space separated from this host area. I might want this host area to be its own separate space. I certainly want to separate the back of house area, so I can put a line there. This prep area here might also want to be its own space. And so notice how I'm ignoring this countertop and I'm going right over to the walls. The countertop is not a room separator, but walls are. So you want to make sure that you're creating fully enclosed spaces. Now, I also don't want the room to flow up here into the stairs. So I'm just going to draw a little L shape right there. Now I'll cancel out of there and let me show you the result of what I just did. So let me make sure that the command is reset. I'll click the Modify tool and go back to the Room tool, and I'm going to slowly move around. Now we already saw these spaces. Here's the vestibule space. Here's the host area. Here's the prep area. Here's the main dining room. And notice that the main dining room is ignoring the stairwell, and then finally the back of house area here. When you add those room separators in, it makes it really easy for you to place the rooms exactly where you want them. The next thing is you want to place them in the order you want them numbered in, because as you'll see here, the first one you click becomes number 1. And then this one here will be number 2. This will be number 3, the main dining room. So I'll place it out here, our little prep area, and then our back of house area here. And then I'll finally end up with this storage area and the 2 restrooms. Now, we could certainly rename all of those rooms. It's easy enough to do. Just zoom in on the tag, select the tag, then click again right on the label, and you can input the name of the room. Now, I'm going to skip the rest for now and move on to the next step. If you move your mouse around in the space, you'll see that at 4 points around that room tag, there is this X right here. Now, if you highlight it, Revit tells you that's the room. If you click when you see that X, it actually selects the room object. And then over here on properties, you can manipulate that room object. So what I want to do is scroll down here and look at some of the other properties. So I've got various properties. I've got comments, occupancy, department. I've got finish information. There's a color scheme already built into this template that colors based on the departments. Now, department is more of a commercial designation. I don't think we would use the word department in a restaurant situation, but in this case, I'm going to use the department field for the function. Now, it is possible to create my own custom function field, but I don't really think it's necessary in this case. I'm just going to borrow department for that purpose. You can type in any value you want here for department. It's just a text field. I can put in public areas, for example, for the main dining room. For this room, I can make that back of house. And I'm just going to put one or two more designations here. So I can select each of these toilet rooms here using my control key. If you're having trouble selecting one of the rooms, just use your tab key and it will highlight, and then make sure control is held down when you click. And I'll just call these toilet rooms. This one here will also be back of house. Now, if you click in the field and you've already typed a value, you don't have to type it again. You can just use this little drop down here and choose the item that you've already typed in. So Revit keeps track of those. And let's just do one or two more here. This is a public area. And we'll make the host station also a public area. I've designated each of the rooms with a designation. I've numbered them all. I've named a few. We can come back and do the other naming later. But the last step is to add the color scheme now. So if we go to the Annotate tab and look over here on the right, we see a color fill panel. Now, depending on your version of Revit, your color fill panel may have only one button. It may have several buttons. If you're in the Suite version, then you have several buttons. But if you're in Revit Architecture, you only have the one. But what we're looking for is color fill legend. And you can see that's the button right here. I'm going to just place that somewhere off to the side of the screen here. And you can see the message says that there's no scheme currently assigned to the view. As soon as I click, though, it will ask me to do just that. It will ask me to assign a scheme. So you can see here that the space type that it's looking for is spaces, but I don't want to color spaces. In fact, I don't even have any spaces in here. Those are engineering objects. We have rooms, which are architectural objects. So I want to choose rooms, and then notice that the color scheme that will become available is department. So this is why I chose the department field to input my functions. And when I click OK, you will see that Revit will automatically assign a color to each one of those departments that we typed in, and this legend that we placed over here will fill in the label next to each one to show us what each of those colors means. So just a few clicks is all it takes for you to make this very nice graphical presentation which illustrates the function of all of the various spaces in the model. Now, I did a really simple example here, but you can imagine that if you spent a little bit more time thinking about exactly what you wanted the color scheme to represent, that there's all sorts of things that you could do with this functionality.